Hi, this is Daryl Myatt from Keller, Texas. Today is Thursday, January 20th, 2011. Of course, I'm sure you've seen President Hu Jintao from China is still in Washington being courted by the Obamas. They are doing all kinds of fun things. You know, it's kind of funny. Yesterday on the news, for the first time ever, I heard somebody say President Who, and was actually referring to someone specific. Don't know how many times I heard somebody say that in high school. President Who? Anyway, also I noticed last night they had this huge dinner bash, something like 25,000 a plate or something like that. And, everyone was dressed to the gills, lots of tuxedos, some stars turned out, everybody dressed to impress. Michelle Obama had her beautiful red gown on. Is that for Red China? I'm just curious. And, of course, the Obama girls were decked out, and they had even some traditional Chinese footwear on. Pair of Nikes. Sorry. Anyway, I'm sure the two were talking, the two biggest economies in the world getting together. And of course, China wants to do away with the dollar as the most used currency. They want to implement their own. So it's like the two biggest kids on the block getting together, and one of them has to dominate. So, curious to see who's going to come out on top with that one. In China, they censor the internet. You can't see a lot of stuff on the internet that you can see in America and pretty much everywhere else in the world. You can't see anything X-rated, for one thing, and that's a good thing. But you also can't look up passages of the Bible in China. That's what I've been told from people that live there. And there's a lot of other censorship on the internet. Brings me to today's top story. It's called the Identity Ecosystem, Obama's Plan for Internet Control. Okay, the Obama administration has yet to come up with a plan to end the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which are draining our economy. He's yet to prevent the current mortgage meltdown, which I'm in real estate, it's affecting me. He's yet to get more Americans back to work or do away with pork barrel spending and government corruption, just to name a few of the overriding concerns plaguing our nation today. Instead, he's motivated by a desire to make our lives easier. The president wants to implement a universal Internet ID that would eliminate the use for multiple usernames and passwords. For those inclined to view the government as a benevolent institution, this can be viewed as a considerate gesture in a time of economic and social unrest. However, for those who would take seriously John Adams' warning to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty, this latest move is nothing short of a Trojan horse attempt to sidestep privacy concerns and institute a national ID, all the while giving the government even greater access to our most personal information. Under the stated goal of achieving internet security and consumer convenience, the Identity Ecosystem, as the program has been dubbed, would supposedly streamline the process of doing business online by replacing the various login names and passwords currently used to access personal accounts and information on various websites with a universal Internet ID. However, as Kurt Hopkins points out in the New York Times, a user would have one verified ID, which would be known by the government and a set of large corporations. Now, given the periodic outbreak of governmental and corporate shenanigans, we fail to see the benefit of such a system. So, who is the president entrusted with being the gatekeeper of our most sensitive online transactions? Not the Department of Homeland Security, nor the National Security Agency, which carries out the government's eavesdropping programs, but rather the Identity Ecosystem will supposedly be overseen by the Commerce Department. A move clearly intended. It would improperly make use of such highly personal information, okay? Yet in the wake of 9/11, information sharing between government agencies has become so commonplace that it would be naive to think that the DHS and NSA, both of which has been jockeying for control of the nation's cybersecurity, won't have easy access to the information. Still, if the American people refuse to accept a universal Internet ID as a way of life, then it really doesn't matter who oversees the program. In a typical Orwellian fashion, the government has come up with a way around that potential hurdle as well. Touting the Internet ID's convenience and so-called ability to enhance online trust and privacy, the Obama administration essentially plans to push its identity ecosystem as a way to cut through the government's bureaucratic red tape at the federal, state, and local levels. Private corporations will eventually follow suit, making it all but impossible for the average American to avoid using the ID. Does this remind you of anything? Anyone? Mark of the Beast, maybe? Revelation 13, verse 16 through 18? You know that passage, right? Now, I'm not saying this is the mark of the beast, but it's moving us closer to more easily accepting one. Let me say that. In that passage, it says, "He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. A lot of people are familiar with that. Now, we've had the Real ID. We've had the, what was the latest one we just had overturned? But in 2005, President Bush tried to implement the Real ID program, where everyone had to have this national ID. And a lot of people are very concerned that this could be the instrument used to usher in the mark of the beast. I have always been a proponent that RFID chip, about the size of a grain of rice, that's implanted under your skin, I think that's going to become the mark of the beast myself. But that's just me. It's implanted right here in the hand. They even have them now that are implanted in the forehead, and it can also regulate your body's own immune system. They have this new chip that can make your body do things that it fails to do on its own. It's incredible technology, but scary when you think about it. Anyway, so he's trying to come out with this Internet ID. You can't get on the Internet unless you have this ID. And, of course, the government will have their hands on this. Does anyone know what the opposite of freedom is? It's control. And the government is trying to control you and control me and control everything in our lives. That's not freedom, people. That's not what this government was set up to do. The government was intended for the people, by the people, and of the people. But anymore, our government has just become government for the government, and to hell with the people. Okay? That's not the way government's supposed to work. That's not democracy. That's dictatorship. Something's got to be done. And I know there's a lot of things that are going to happen that we're not going to like, that all the prayer in the world won't stop it from happening, because it's part of God's plan, and it's prophesied in here. The mark of the beast is going to happen, whether we like it or not. The one world government is going to happen, whether we like it or not. America is going to lose its sovereignty, whether we like it or not. Christians are going to be killed for their belief in Jesus Christ, whether we like it or not. I'm not trying to be a downer here. Just trying to let you know some basic truths that the Bible is clear to point out. And we're not to be afraid in this. We're to be happy that we're being persecuted for the name of Jesus, because great will be our reward in heaven. But when it's all said and done, it really doesn't matter what party controls the White House or Congress, because the object of our bureaucratic government remains the same: total control of the nation, of the Internet, and ultimately of you and me. That's what this is all about. Alright, let's get on to some other news. This story out of IsraelToday.com says the U.S. blocks the UN condemnation of Jewish settlements. Okay, the U.S. prevented the UN Security Council from voting on and adopting a resolution that condemned all Jewish communities in Judea, Samaria, and the eastern side of Jerusalem as illegal. The resolution was submitted by Lebanon, but was clearly drafted by the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinians have been threatening for months now to seek UN condemnation of Israeli settlement activity, a step they hoped would open a way to UN recognition of a unilateral declaration of independence in Judea and Samaria. The resolution referred to Judea and Samaria, including eastern Jerusalem, as Palestinian territory, and insisted that the presence of Jews there is illegal and constitutes a major obstacle to the achievement of a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. It demanded that Israel forbid all Jewish construction in these areas in preparation for their surrender to the Palestinian Authority, which would be followed by an ethnic cleansing of all Jews currently living there. Ethnic cleansing. I'm sorry, isn't that called racism or anti-Semitism or genocide or murder? Yeah, let's clean it up with ethnic cleansing. Yeah, that sounds so much more civilized, right? The U.S. representative at the meeting expressed strong opposition to the resolution and said the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only be solved via direct negotiations between the two sides. I love it when they do something right. I mean, it's few and far between, but it happens every now and then. Because of the U.S. opposition, the parties behind the resolution knew it was pointless to call for a vote on the matter. I love that. So, the U.S. stepped up and said, you know what? No, we're not going to allow that. I like to see that happen. Here's something out of Fox News. I know. I don't usually use their stories because I'm not sure if they can be trusted. Well, whatever. It says scientists warn Iran could produce enough nuclear material for a warhead in 5 months. Yeah, the outgoing defense minister of Israel, Meir Dagan, something like that, said it could take them 4 to 5 years just a few months ago. Excuse me. But these scientists, this out of Istanbul today, says the U.S. is joining 5 other world powers for talks with Iran this week, publicly confident that international efforts have slowed Tehran's capability to make nuclear arms and created more time to press Tehran to accept curbs on its atomic activities. But while diplomats and officials at the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, the UN Nuclear Monitor, they agree that Iran's enrichment program has struggled over past years, the Federation of American Scientists warns against complacency. It notes impressive improvements in the performance of the Iranian machines that enrich uranium. Excuse me. This is an activity that has provoked UN sanctions because it could be used to make nuclear weapons. Washington's message is essentially this: Iran is struggling with uranium enrichment, a process that can create both nuclear fuel and fissile warhead material. Significantly, that view is backed by Israel, Iran's implacable foe, and considered to have the Mideast's best intelligence on Iran's nuclear strivings. Of course, that Stuxnet virus set them back quite a bit. But in a study shared ahead of the publication with the Associated Press, the Washington-based FAS argues that Iran last year appears to have increased efficiency of the machines that produce enriched uranium by 60%, giving it the technical capability to produce enough material for a simple nuclear warhead in 5 months. January, February, March, April, May, June. Puts it about end of June, July. Of course, Iran insists they're only seeking nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, yet they want to usher in global chaos to bring their 12th Imam or Mahdi back into the world. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And Iran says, this out of Haaretz, a military strike would not stop our nuclear program. Comment was made by Iran IAEA envoy, comes as Tehran denies it is an offer to new uranium swap deal in upcoming P5+1 nuclear talks in Istanbul. Iran will be able to carry out uranium enrichment even in the case of a military attack on its nuclear facilities, Iran's nuclear envoy said in Moscow today. He says, we're faced with a very serious threat, and so we have had to take measures to protect our facilities. We have provided for another facility in Fardo near Qom, Ali Asghar Soltanieh, envoy to the International Atomic Energy Agency, told reporters. So they've got several areas, and they're stepping up their defense against all these nuclear facilities. So we'll see how that plays out, I guess. You've seen in the news all these birds and fishes dying. You know what? It's all over the place. It's not just Arkansas, Louisiana. It's not just in America. It's all over the world. We've seen it in Europe, Switzerland, Australia. There's all kinds of things happening, and I think it might be part of Bible prophecies that talk about food shortages and famines in various places. Here's another story to add to that. This out of TUOIR News. What is that? TUOITRE News. Okay. Freezing Vietnam to enter another cold snap. Okay, it talks about the freezing temperatures in mountainous areas dropping to -4 degrees Celsius. Northern Vietnam is to undergo another fresh cold snap starting Saturday. Temperature in the Delta region provinces will dip to 11 to 12 degrees Celsius. Now, here's the problem. The record low temperature this year has frozen over 7,000 buffaloes and over 4,000 cows to death in more than 12 northern mountainous provinces. All kinds of livestock are dying in that area. This is the people's food supply. Some of the deaths, we don't really know what's happening, but in this case, the freezing cold is freezing these animals. So we need to pray that God will provide us with plenty of food and watch over and protect people and provide what we need. The basics: shelter, food, water, clothing, air. These people need our prayers. Okay, let me ask you something. Are you obedient to God? Are you walking in obedience to God right now? I know a lot of people are like, "What, are you talking to me? What, are you talking to me?" Yeah, I'm talking to you. Let me read something out of Matthew 21, verses 28 through 32. This is the parable of the two sons, and this is Jesus talking. He says, "But what do you think? A man had two sons, and he came to the first and said, 'Son, go work today in my vineyard.' He answered and said, 'I will not.' But afterward he regretted it, and he went. Then he came to the second and said likewise, and he answered and said, 'I will go, sir.' But he did not go. Which of the two did the will of his father? They said to him, 'The first.' Jesus said to them, 'Assuredly I say to you that tax collectors and harlots enter the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him, but tax collectors and harlots believed him, and when you saw it, you did not afterward relent and believe him.'" Okay, so in that parable, there were two sons. Guy said, "Hey, go work in the vineyard." First son said, "I won't do it," and then he went later. Second son said, "Sure, I'll do it," but he didn't go. Sound like your kids? Someone has said that the road to destruction is paved with good intentions. In this parable, Jesus is showing that our actions prove our obedience or disobedience. Even though the one son had no intention of obeying, the fact that he obeyed in the end made him the obedient son. The other son said the right thing, but he didn't follow through. He gave lip service, but his words were useless because he didn't do what he said he would do. Probably a politician. We're reminded that our professions of faith are only as valid as the actions that follow them. So which brother in this story illustrates your walk with Christ? Just curious. Okay, I've been talking about suffering. Let's continue. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to suffering. In Matthew 5, verse 16, it says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." I know. This is one of those coffee mug verses, the kind that most of us are familiar with, as well as we should be. I'm not knocking it. But how many of us think of this familiar verse within the context of suffering? I know you're probably like, there is nothing about suffering in there. Well, shining and suffering are inseparably linked to each other, because it's when a Christian suffers and honors the Lord in the midst of his suffering that they truly shine. Okay? Pain has a powerful way of getting people's attention, right? We stand up and notice when a coworker, a neighbor, or an acquaintance is dealing with something painful. And it's when we suffer that people are watching to see how we handle ourselves. You've heard me say before, you may be the only Bible some people ever read. They're watching you. They're seeing how you live. They're seeing how you worship. They're seeing how you are in times of need, in times of pain, in times of stress. Painful times are also an unparalleled opportunity to glorify God. I mean, let's face it, suffering can bring out the worst behavior in people. But when we show the kind of character and the conduct that reflects the heart of Jesus, when people see us bringing our spiritual A game, even though we're hurting, it legitimizes what we're all about, and we shine in a big way. I have to give it up to my dad. He is the most righteous man I have ever met in my life. He has lived with God as his guide all his life, and I've seen him go through some serious ordeals, and he's always got a smile, and he says, hey, God will bring me to it, he'll bring me through it. And he's always faithful in the most difficult times. And I respect this man. I admire him, and I hope someday, in some way, I can be as righteous as my own dad. But it's a mistake to think that our trials are just our own personal ordeals. They're much more than that. They're also a witness to the watching world around us. Whether they're a good or bad witness is really up to us. Let me read to you 1 Peter 2, verse 21 through 23. For to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who, when he was reviled, did not revile in return, when he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously. I hope in your time of sorrow, in your time of suffering, that you will still glorify God and thank God for the tribulation that you're in, because we know tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance produces hope, and hope can never fail. And in the end, faith, hope, and love will always be with us. Of course, the Bible tells us that the greatest is love. So, thank God for the hard times. Rejoice in your tribulations as well as in your happiness. And the world will watch, and they'll wonder what you have that they don't have. And then you can share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. God bless you. I hope to see you again tomorrow.